Good morning, everyone. I'm New York State Senator Pete Harckham, along with my colleagues from the Assembly, Assembly members Dana Levenberg and Chris Burdick. We are also joined by members of the Climate Psychiatry Alliance, as well as the Climate Psychology Alliance, along with our student advocates from Smart Empowerment and Next 100. I'd also like to acknowledge Dr. Lisa Van Susteren, who's a MD, general and forensic psychiatrist in Washington, D.C., and she is an expert on the physical and psychological impacts of climate change, exactly what we're going to be talking about. We're also going to be joined by speakers, two psychologists, Tony Pugliafico, who's an associate professor of medical psychology in psychiatry at Columbia University Irving Medical Center, and Joe Talercio, assistant professor of psychology and clinical psychiatry at Weill Cornell Medical College and New York Presbyterian Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. Did I get all of those right? All right, thank you. We're also probably our most important speakers. We're going to hear from a number of youth advocates from Smart Empowerment and Next 100. And then if other legislators come in, we will also hear from them. We're here today with this group of researchers and clinicians and young people to talk about something we don't normally talk about. When we talk about climate change, we talk a lot about the physical impacts of climate change and what we're living with now: flooding, fires, excessive heat, physical health impacts, smoke, asthma. These are the kind of things we talk a lot about when we talk about what's happening with climate change. But as you will hear from both the research and the people who are living it, the young people who are living it, the amount of stress and trauma climate change causes young people really needs to be talked about, and we as policymakers need to address it in the same way we deal with other resiliency. So, for instance, I have a bill that would create the Office of Resilience to coordinate statewide resiliency to address some of those things we talked about before. But what is a coordinated response to the trauma in young people caused by climate change? And what are we going to do about that? More mental health resources. There's a constitutional amendment we're advancing for mental health parity. We have things like emergency first responder peer-to-peer bill that Assemblymember Burdick and I carry. Assemblymember Levenberg and I carry a number of climate change bills together. But we've got to take a holistic approach to this. But until we fully understand, and that's why I'm so excited that we're going to hear from the clinician and the research side, as well as the folks who are living this and what their lived experience is, because that's what really matters. So I think with that, I'm going to step aside and I'm going to pass it over to Tony to talk a bit about his research and his work. And then we'll hear from other practitioners, we'll hear from the students and other legislators. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Harckham, and thank you all for being here today. My name is Dr. Anthony Pugliafico, and we're honored to be discussing this important topic. We are all mental health specialists who have growing concerns about the impact of extreme weather and climate change on the mental health of our residents, and particularly our young people. We are seeing it in our classrooms, in our therapy offices, and in our daily lives. Young people who are experiencing more and more PTSD and trauma from extreme weather events, such as Senator Harckham mentioned, whether it's floods, wildfires, even the orange sky that we all experienced very recently, and that was quite jarring. But we're also seeing intense anxiety and hopelessness in our young people about the world that they will inhabit. So we are really here to provide information and to push strongly for legislation that incorporates mental health into our climate resilience packages, many of which are already either enacted or in the works. Mental health is health, and we have a green constitution here in New York State that gives us all the right to a clean and healthful environment. And we believe strongly that mental health should be considered along with all other aspects of physical health when we're thinking about how do we respond to the extreme weather that we will continue to see here in New York State. I will just say before wrapping up that we're lucky that Dr. Van Susteren and other colleagues of ours has conducted large-scale survey data about how young people feel about climate change. What we have learned is that, as you see in the map over there, the majority of survey respondents, particularly our young people in New York State, are worried about climate change. 42.8% of young people said that worry about climate change is negatively impacting their mental health, and 73.8% of survey respondents mentioned that they are likely to vote for candidates who support aggressive climate policy. Our young people are expecting us to act and to protect their well-being and the planet. And with that, I will pass things over to my colleague, Dr. Gilerchio, to discuss some specific action strategies.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. So while the psychological impact of climate change is significant, it doesn't just help to talk about the risks, it's important to also talk about solutions. And just briefly, there's a few things New York State can take that also builds up what they've already been doing. First and foremost, New York can help build up community resilience. And this can be done in a few different manners, but New York can help encourage local community responses to the climate disasters. This also helps build up what we call collective action. Because this is an existential crisis, one of the best ways we can respond to such disaster is by building up a sense of a community that they can work together to accomplish some kind of solution. New York State can also help by building community resilience by building a psychological first aid response to the disasters. We already have similar programs in place for other disasters. This program can simply just expand what the state is already doing to respond to acute disasters. And finally, community resilience can also be in the form of education. Educating our first responders of what to expect when disasters are on the rise. This can also be on educating mental health providers of the risks, such as New York State offering continuing education credits in order to help inform mental health providers of what these disasters can look like. This can also be informing students through a K-12 education program. New York State already has some programs in place, however, this can be expanded. A recent study conducted by Yale University found a majority of New Yorkers across every single county in the state support an expansion of the education program to help inform students of both the risks and the causes of the climate disasters. Right, so implementing of such a program is actually already in line with what New Yorkers want. New York can also help the psychological well-being of its citizens by helping invest in green infrastructure in the communities. Not only does this provide physical economic benefits, it is cheaper to prevent than to repair, but also investing in community helps inform its citizens that the government cares about those people, it cares about the community. And as we know, investing in a community has drastic psychological benefits, everything from reducing the use of the healthcare system to reducing psychiatric medication usage to decreasing worry to even decreasing suicide. And then finally, New York State can also help its citizens combat the climate crisis and the psychological impacts of that by investing in green urban spaces. Such an investment helps combat the most acute aspects of a climate disaster, such as helping keep the air a little bit cleaner with planting more trees, or helping the groundwater be absorbed a little better by having lawns instead of sidewalks. However, as we invest in green urban spaces, the color green itself just helps us feel better. It triggers a relaxation center in our brain. Simultaneously, as green spaces are developed, the economic life of a surrounding area tends to thrive. In addition, crime tends to decrease as such parks are developed, and a better sense of community is also developed, building off this idea that we need to incorporate the community in order to accurately respond to the psychological disasters from the climate crisis. Now, all these solutions are realistic, are approachable, can be achieved in New York. However, they are missing a big thing. And as my colleague, Dr. Poliafico, was just mentioning, kids, youths across not just New York State, but across the entire country do not feel heard and do not feel that their government is listening to them effectively. And so while we're here talking about ways we can improve the psychological well-being of New Yorkers, it's important to have those younger voices be part of this conversation. And so I want to turn our attention and turn the microphone to some of those voices here today who deserve to be heard because they are actually the most vulnerable to these disasters. And that being said, I would like to hear from some of your younger voices today.
Hello, my name is Sadie. I'm 16 and I'm a junior from New York City. Climate change affects all of our lives as students, whether we learn about it and talk about it or not. We all witness the flooding that occurs in our city, in our subways, in our homes, as mentioned, the wildfire smoke that was visible last year, our warmer winters. Most of us, most students my age have at least a vague memory of Hurricane Sandy. So all these experiences are definitely present in our lives. And I think that climate education and awareness about the mental health impacts on students really, really important, because the more we learn about what's happening, why it's happening, and how we can fix it, the more tackleable the issue appears. And it definitely impacts the mental state of students. I mean, when you are young and you're maybe not as familiar with the details of the situation, and you can't see necessarily clear plans for change, it can be really daunting to imagine the potential future that's ahead of us. And so I think that providing mental health resources for students to address this issue, and providing education for students to help them see how things are working and what we can do about it, I think is really important to combat this as an issue. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great.
Hi, I'd like to speak as someone who is a university student who has gotten involved in environmental initiatives in university. So I've recently become involved in a mutual aid group that focuses on supporting those hit hardest by climate-driven change. And as has been mentioned right before this, youth are stepping up, organizing and distributing resources in response to environmental disruptions. And through being at the mutual aid table, I've met a lot of friends in the community who have sort of expressed and shown to us like the really heartbreaking effects of climate change, and the very tangible effects of worsening conditions in the weather and with storms. For instance, I have friends in the community who need to replace their blankets or tarps as a response to worsening conditions that would have sufficed just 10 years earlier. So climate anxiety is real, especially for those who are most vulnerable. And that's why we're advocating today to get our voices heard and to advocate for climate mental health support and climate education.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Well, I just want to say my name's Dana Levenberg. I represent the 95th Assembly District in Lower Hudson Valley. Again, thank you so much to my colleague in the Senate, Senator Pete Harcum, who chairs the Environmental Conservation Committee and has a number of bills that address some of the issues that were brought up here today, that some of which I co-sponsor, and my colleague Chris Burdick in the Assembly also has a number of bills that he sponsors with Senator Harcum. And really a huge shout out to our clinicians, to our researchers, to our professors, and our educators, our leaders, and of course to our students. You are our future, and we need you, and we need you to be part of this conversation. Having you here today to talk about what some of the impacts are, but also what some of the solutions could be, really makes a difference. And I think, what we heard about what some potential solutions are, what actions we can take as policymakers. I think, making sure that we always have students at the table, students' voices included in the conversation is so, so critically important. I'm just going to talk about a couple of little things that we know. One of the other things I think that is really important is not just that we sponsor policy, but that we actually get it passed and enacted. And once enacted, that we actually act on it. So we have the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, CLCPA. I hope I got those all right in the right order. And we also have that's already passed, as well as Cap and Invest, which, many of these bills have plans and priorities and everything laid out. We even got the Environmental Bond Act passed, but we can't seem to take action. And what we are hearing from these students is that we have to stop dilly-dallying. We need to take action. We need to move forward on the priorities that have been laid out, on the actions that we need to take. We need to move away from our reliance on fossil fuels. We need to move to electrification. We need to move to being reliant on sustainable energy production. And we can do this if we put our money where our mouths are. So we know, and again, we have the resources in place in many cases. We need to continue to have students involved in all of these. So when we take action, then our students, our young people can actually see that there are solutions, that we can actually start moving towards a climate future that we can survive in, and that we can all be a part of. And we know it may not be perfect, but it can be better than what we have in front of us if we don't take action. Things like the New York Heat Act are things that we really need to make sure it pass, again, to take the requirement away from companies to continue to build out gas and fossil fuel infrastructure, and be able to put that money in towards building out sustainable energy production, distribution. And we need to pass things like complete streets legislation that talks about how we actually consider all of our state roads and all of the people that can use them, from electric bikes, regular human-powered bicycles, and pedestrians, to electric vehicles and other types of transportation. We need to, again, move away from those single passenger gas-powered vehicles, and start thinking much bigger picture. And we need to continue to put money behind our climate action and resiliency. Like we have, hopefully we'll get the $500 million additional for the Environmental Protection Fund, the $600 million for the Clean Water Infrastructure Act in our budget, funding for the Hudson River Estuary Project for some people who are down around us, to make sure that we're keeping our air and our water clean. And again, all my colleagues that are here today, we continue to work on all of these pieces of legislation. We need to get them passed, and we need to actually move forward with all that the money that is provided to make a sustainable future for our young people. And I know it was discussed a little bit earlier that we know that these fears and the impact on mental health can also make a difference in how decisions that people make. Like, they don't want to have children. They don't want to bring another child into the world. And this is really, really sad. We need to make sure that we take the actions necessary to have a sustainable future for our children, for our grandchildren, and their grandchildren. So with that, we're going to continue moving forward. And I want to make sure that I'm gonna introduce my colleague, Chris Burdick, Assembly member, in a second. And I just want to make sure that I didn't miss anything or anybody that I was supposed to say thank you to, and I think I didn't. So with that, Assembly Member Chris Burdick.
Thank you so much, Dana. Excuse me. I'm Assembly Member Chris Burdick, and I represent the 93rd Assembly District in Westchester County. And, we've heard how such an impact is made on young people today with the fears that come from the lack of the kind of aggressive action that those young people are looking for to fight the climate crisis. We've heard that testimonials, in fact, from the young people themselves. And I want to thank my colleagues, Senator Pete Harckham and Assemblywoman Dana Levenberg, for their leadership in recognizing this issue and in sponsoring legislation to provide that first responders and the education community does something about it, addresses it. And I will give you a personal story of what Dana mentioned a minute ago about decision making that young people are making. Last year, my wife and I visited my brother and his two adult children, and we got into the usual family conversations. And I spoke to my nephew and said, "So what are your plans, Tristan? Are you planning at some point of settling down and having a family?" And the first words out of his mouth were, "Why would I do that when we have a planet that is not going to exist 20, 30 years from now because of climate change?" And I've heard that from others as well. So we need to follow parallel paths. One is dealing with the immediate issues of people, those young people who are having what really is PTSD and needing to address those issues, but also let's get to the underlying causes. And that is that we have the resources in the state. We need the political will to move forward and to get everything forward that should be done, like cap and invest. And as Senator Harckham has said, very disappointing that the governor suspended that for 2 years and pushed it into the future. We can't push things into the future. These are crises. They need to be handled now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Anybody else wish to speak? Would you like to, please? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hi, my name is Kira Blake. I'm with Start Empowerment. And so you heard from some of the youth that are tangential to our programs that we work with, but I'd like to say that we, so far to date, have reached almost 4,000 students that continue to learn about climate justice, environmental justice, social justice, and their intersections. With most of our students being in the Bronx, which is known as an environmental justice community and one of the most impacted communities across the nation. I would also like to say that for us and myself, my co-founder and myself, for us, being able to learn about climate education, being able to feel like there was something that we could do, being able to understand and analyze our experiences was only a result of education, and then having a further ability to tie that into positive change making and empowerment was a critical part of our coming into life and Start Empowerment coming into life. And so for me, it's really a tangible, immediate, and visceral reality that according to the climate clock, we have 4 years, 119 days, and something odd hours, give or take, left to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, risking otherwise we risk severe and irreversible impacts to ecosystems and the locations where we live, work, and play. And so for us, we've been a part of different initiatives such as the Climate Resilience and Education Task Force, which is looking to push for statewide climate education and currently has an appropriation of $536,000 to see how NYSED can actually be a part of this process in New York State as well. Because for us, we believe that with climate education comes empowerment, and with education and awareness comes greater action. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
Thank you. So I just want to close by saying, you know, one of the things we've learned through the opioid crisis is that there's a nexus between substance use disorders and behavioral health, self-medication. And when I was your age, I was using drugs and drinking alcoholically on a daily basis. And it wasn't until my late 20s when I was several years into recovery that I learned I had been self-medicating depression and anxiety. And so this is one of those teachable moments where we now know what a new stressor is, where the new trauma, where the new PTSD is, and it's time for us to act on it. So I want to thank all of the students who are here today, those who spoke, those who didn't speak. Want to thank all of the clinicians who are doing such great work on this. And I want to thank certainly Assemblymember Levenberg for sponsoring this event, and our good friend and colleague, Assemblymember Chris Burdick. And with that, we want to say thank you.